there's some mistakes that we see and some that if I was a family going through this would kind of just bug the hell out of me. Let me set an example. I'm a full service funeral home. I do my cremations. My average family is $4,000 or $5,000, let's say, right? That's the average contract that we do. All of a sudden, I'm now offering a $1,200 direct cremation package, right? But I still like those $4,000 or $5,000 contracts, right? So in my mind, right, how do I get that $1,000 customer back up to 4,000 or 5,000, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My first mistake in that scenario is thinking that $1,000 customer is a $4,000, $5,000 customer.
Right.
I think that's mistake number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is another mistake you would think in that scenario that we see more often than not?
I think sometimes wanting to give every single option to that customer. Well, it's not necessarily option. People will refer to it as like nickeling and diming a customer, where somebody feels like they're being nickel and dimed for every little thing. Like you want to talk to a funeral director on the phone, okay, you're going to pay for that. You want our help with paperwork, okay, you're going to pay for that. It's like there has to be some level of, there's an expectation that they're working with a funeral home. A funeral director is needed, right? Your staff is needed. So there has to be some expectation of there's general things included in this. You know, there is some level of basic services that need to be upheld, even with the direct cremation customer. So I'm seeing this more and more frequently now is like funeral homes are wanting to charge the customer for, it was one thing to meet with a family in person. And if the question can be posed like, would you prefer to have an in-person arrangement conference, or sometimes even would you prefer a funeral director to come to your home, depending on the area?
Yeah.
And that's a different thing than we want to charge you to talk to us on the phone. That's like a really hard sell. And if I think I was the consumer, I would immediately be like, no thanks. So those are kind of the things. Like it's one thing to offer the options, right? Because that's the idea, is that you give a very basic cremation package and that somebody can add things on, but we don't need to get to the level of like, you can't speak to us unless you pay us. Like they're paying you a direct cremation fee and there needs to be some level included in that.
Yeah. And we do see that. And we do see that that has negative effects on success. Yeah. And I will say that some of the most successful brands who obviously have scale and they can leverage this, but they do allow you to come in and actually come into the funeral home without having to pay. I mean, when we go back to what the goal is, it's really to stuff as much value as you can into a low cost package, right? That's really what the cremation brand is. So the more and more you do, the more and more profits you have, even if it's at a smaller percentage, to include more value into your affordable package, right? So that is one mistake. All right. So the next section that I think we need to talk about is the mentality, right? I think that we all of us have different ideas of how we view a low cost brand versus the traditional. And I think this section is where it's going to be the hardest to understand because it's not something that you can just change. I don't think it's something that even like operationally, it's like, if I do this, it's going to do one thing. It's to do this, it's going to do another thing. Like this kind of, the way you think about these types of families, this type of business can really define the success of your cremation brand. And I think first, why don't you talk about staffing? Not necessarily staffing, but like how your staff thinks about.
I think this is especially important when you have the two brands, when you've got the traditional funeral home and now you're offering, an online brand that's doing more of a direct cremation. I've seen multiple times where, because there's not clear messaging to the staff about the difference between the two and how things would be handled, there's just general overall confusion of, so if a customer calls on this business line, they're going to get a cremation for $1,500. But if they call on our traditional line, they're going to get a cremation for $3,500. Like staff needs to really understand the difference between those two packages and what is the value difference. So you not only need to be able to explain it to the consumer, because the consumer is likely going to be able to see both brands. You need to have a very clear message, I think, to your staff about what the difference is. And it does come down to the value. So where is your value difference with the $3,500 package? Like, what are we doing differently for that family that we're not doing for the family that's paying $1,500? And so for those things to work, I guess primarily is only when you have those kind of two brands, I think. If there's not clear messaging between those, it's almost like that side brand doesn't really have the chance for survival, because when a customer calls them, they can tell that there's confusion. It's like, well, we have this brand, we need clear direction to the staff on what we're doing here and like what should be the messaging.
There needs to be almost like two separate, I don't know if people use, I like scripts sometimes use, but like you almost have to have two separate, completely separate arrangement, sales processes going for each one, right?
Yeah.
If family fits a certain criteria, they go to this and they get this experience. If there are other criteria, then they go to this. There should be no middle ground. It shouldn't be muddy.
Right.
You should know and you should give that family the one or the other.
Right. Yep.
I think another thing that maybe not as obvious, but we see impeding success is that people will start a side brand, right? And every time it's a side brand, more often than not, the side brands don't get the love and care that the full brand does. And what ends up happening is, I think the operators, the funeral home owners, the funeral directors forget why they're offering this lower cost package, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You are going to be doing less work. You aren't going to maybe be meeting in person. You're not going to have a 2-hour conference. You're not going to have to worry about services. You don't have to worry about X, Y, and Z, right? It's a very pared down, repetitive service, I think, that you're going to find you're going to be doing. And that's why you're offering that to families. And that kind of comes with a mentality shift, I think, because I think it's always been about how much can I do for this family, but also charge them for that service, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to cost what it's going to cost.